Meanwhile, in honor of National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, we're going to get a closer insight on the role that corporate Canada plays in economic reconciliation and what that means for Indigenous communities. We're joined by David Carrière-Acco. He's a member of the Peter Ballantine Cree Nation, CEO of Acosys, and a professor at McGill University. Also, Jeff, of course, still with us, too. David, good to have you. Thanks for taking the time this morning.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're talking about financial reconciliation, economic reconciliation. One of the lasting legacies of residential schools is children not receiving a comprehensive education. Can you talk about, what economic reconciliation looks like today and how we got here, like what these schools looked like for children who had to go to them?
The schools for residential schools was designed to basically remove the Indian out of the Indigenous person. So they really did not get a proper education, and let alone be in business. I think over the past, at least in my time, in the past 20 years, you see more Indigenous people starting to enter business and entrepreneurship. McGill has a program called, Indigenous Business Management, which I'm part of, and also as an Indigenous professor, I'm teaching, bringing reconciliation into management and strategic courses. So, but if you go back to residential schools, this was not part of our education, and it would be things like trades or arts and crafts, and basically losing your language as well. So it was designed to, just basically give the poorest standard of education for Indigenous people.
It's a setback, right? And I know there's so much work being done today to reconcile, what was lost in those schools, especially financially. But what does the trickle-down effect look like all these years later in communities as well when we're talking about economic reconciliation?
Well, economic reconciliation is it's basically putting things back in the right order. When Canada first was forming with the first settlers, they traded with Indigenous people as a nation-to-nation relationship. And what economic reconciliation now looks like is reestablishing that trade between corporate Canada and Indigenous communities and entrepreneurs, which is a good thing. So looking forward.
David, a question for you. In regards to business, what can Canadian business do to help with partnerships and revenue sharing and things like that through the process?
That's a really good question. Right now, they're doing things like, for example, cultural awareness training. They're also changing policies to bring in more hiring and also more. Basically, more procurement. I've worked with a lot of corporate Canada's clients and helping them develop policies that are basically increasing the amount of Indigenous entrepreneurship or more suppliers coming into the supply chain. And we're seeing a lot more partnerships. One of the ones I can think about is Premium Foods and the Mi'kmaq Nation buying Clearwater for $1 billion. And Clearwater, and it's a 50-50 equity stake. So this is really changing the fabric of Indigenous people in Nova Scotia. And there's a number of examples like that. One, I'm thinking about DNG and Desnete Group, working with a company that's a drone company, I think that's Canada UAVs. Or Canadian UAVs. And this is, targeting the defense sector and other areas. So one of your group has talked about is the role that Indigenous people or the role that Canada's increasing its spend. It's all happening on Indigenous communities or traditional territory or what they call comprehensive land claims. So the fabric is changing quite a bit for the better.
When it comes to economic reconciliation, David, what kind of barriers are still in place? What are the most well-known barriers for Indigenous groups?
Well, I think probably, one of the view is not many Canadians know what economic reconciliation, I mean, why is it so important to have better partnerships with Indigenous communities? One of the biggest things I can say when the partnership is working in territory, having that what we call license to operate, and that's what the Indian Act took away. And we basically remove that license to operate, and that's what Indigenous people are establishing. What is important for us to do business in a very sustainable, equitable way, and Canadians need to understand that more, especially if they want to mine or they want, one Canadian economy. As we move the supply chain from east to west, looking at Europe and Asia, and so to operate and move those supply chains or reconfigure supply chains, it's going to being about what's that look like to license to operate in a very equitable partnership view, and back to that nation-to-nation relationship. And I think when I look forward, that's what economic reconciliation is reestablishing those original partnerships that existed before Confederation. So.
A question for you in regards to that whole sustainable future for the Indigenous peoples. Is there any key attributes you see that are needed both from the government level, but even international? Are there opportunities there for the Indigenous peoples to be able to take advantage and partake more and more in the whole orbit of what's happening?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the things I can really think about is, government has policies that increase the amount of industry participation, and I was thinking things like the industrial technical benefits, or what they have Indigenous participation plans, and where they basically asking, part of the criteria to win a contract, and say an Indigenous participation plan, is that they have to come up with a plan that says how are you going to buy, how are you going to hire, how are you going to invest in the Indigenous community, and more importantly, what I'm seeing is more how are you going to partner. So they have things like joint ventures between non-Indigenous companies and Indigenous companies that provide this real competitive advantage for a non-Indigenous company in many ways, because of what they call diversity spend, that we can, that basically where you can actually become a company that is a diverse supplier in the United States or in Canada. So there's all those particular vehicles, and there's points that could be given to corporate Canada for doing good reconciliation in terms of when they do bids. And of course, one of the things that I benefit as an Indigenous supplier is the set-aside program that Canada has put in as part of their procurement, meaning that there's a certain targeted amount of spend that goes towards Indigenous businesses, and has some key joint ventures with, I'll mention PwC, and we've done quite a bit of good business together in government contracting. But there's a number of these. I'm not the only one that has done this, but other companies have done this as well, and that's advanced, made Indigenous companies more visible in Canada. So I think Canadians have to see more of that, and Canadians have to understand what economic reconciliation is, where it's 1 + 1 = 3, and it's good for Canada, because when Indigenous companies do well and Indigenous communities do well, the surrounding communities do well.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. But David, really appreciate your time today coming on to talk about something that's just so important. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was David Carrière-Acco, member of the Peter Ballantine Cree Nation, CEO of Acosys, and a professor at McGill University.